Nice to be here. I was here 2.5 years ago, actually. But then, as I had quitted my previous position with another startup, Synthetic MR, and I was here describing the journey that I did with that company. A company within software that we took with 35 million Swedish crown in venture capital to 1.5 billion in market cap and globally established software. Together with General Electric, Philips and Siemens. But now since 2 years, I'm the CEO of Cavis Technologies, a company located in Uppsala, Sweden. Okay, so the product is on market. It's CE marked under MDD, and MDR is under preparation. And we are investing in growth at the moment. The company was founded in 2015. We have a diagnostic class 3 device, which is an invasive device used to diagnose the arteries around the heart to decide whether to treat or not to treat patients with coronary artery disease. We have one patent pending and one patent family granted both in the US and Europe. The most important patent is granted, so that's good news. We do all our R&D in-house. I will come back a little bit on the team later on in the presentation. We work with a distributor sales strategy. So we have one product. I believe very much in this early phase of a company, it's important to keep focus. We have focus on device that we have right now and to get that out on the market. Therefore, we are working with distributors. We actually manufacture the device in Sweden, which I think is nice, in Tyresö. We are preparing for FDA, and we are in the controlled market release phase. So I don't know if you know this, but 1/3 of us in here will die from cardiovascular disease. 1/3. It's the most common cause of death globally, any country. If you go for low, mid, high-income countries, most common cause of death, cardiovascular disease. We are in the area of coronary artery disease, and that's half of all the deaths within cardiovascular diseases. And CAD, or coronary artery disease, by itself is the most common cause of death. The disease could be epicardial, so it's in the artery, it's a focal disease, or it could be microcirculatory, so it could be a sort of a global disease in your arteries and in your microcirculation in the heart. If you have the epicardial, you will diagnose, and if there is a reason to treat, you will either enter with a balloon and or a stent to revascularize the artery. If you have the disease in 3 arteries or more, you're likely to go for a bypass surgery. Microcirculation, that's sort of 50% of the patients with symptoms ending up at the lab will not have a diagnosed epicardial disease. Usually, they are leaving the hospital without a diagnosis. It might be that they have a microcirculatory disease, and in those cases, optical medical treatment is what you could offer. 6 million treatments are done annually, globally, but there is a high risk of mistreatment, impacting 37% of the treatments, mainly due to over-treatment, impacting 1 year survival. So how do you diagnose them? So you basically roughly have two ways of doing it. Either you rely only on imaging, so that's angiograms. You look at the images and you do an estimation. Do we need to treat or not to treat this this patient? In the imaging, the thing is that it's well adapted for acute cases, right? Because you don't have time to do it. If you end up with myocardial infarction at the hospital, then it's obviously an acute case, and you just need to open up the arteries again to save the muscle, basically, the heart. So, but in 42% of lesions identified with imaging are overestimated. So there you run a great risk of getting an overtreatment if you're only if you're only diagnosed with imaging. In all the cases that are non-acute, so that's in the size of 80%, those are applicable for invasive measurement. Yeah. So a short recap then. So in 20% of cases are acute, so their imaging is very well suited because it's quick. So you can take a quick diagnose, you can open up and ensure that the blood starts to flow again in the heart muscle. But there is a very high risk of overtreatment because you're overestimating. There is studies showing that you're overestimating the narrowing, so you will overtreat patients. A better way to do it is to do an invasive measurement to actually see how much pressure loss you have at that particular place to decide whether you should treat or not treat that patient. By doing the invasive measurement, you will reduce the amount of stents that you place in the patient with 30%. But the challenge is that even with current methods for the invasive measurements, you will do mainly an overestimation or misclassification in up to 18-20% of the cases. And that is due to the size of the patient. So this guy, sort of in my height actually, has a significant risk. So I have a significant risk of getting over or under treated when I end up there, if I end up there. The lady in the middle has a very low risk. And you can guess it, the guy out to the right has a high risk. And it's not just, related to overweight or so. It could be a marathon runner, for example, that has a big heart. You have a big height difference between your upper side and your lower side of the heart, and this will impact the measurement as it is today. And I mean, honestly, I don't think it's fair, right? It's not fair. And this guy and that guy is probably more common at the labs than the lady in the middle. So the thing is that the height difference is due to the hydrostatic pressure in the body. So it's not just like when you do these type of measurements, you have a cut-off level. So if you have a pressure loss of more than 20%, you should treat the patient. But depending on if you go on the upper side of the heart or the lower side of the heart, for this guy that we saw to the right, if he's ill on the upper side, then he will get over-treated due to his size. If he suddenly was ill instead on the lower side of the heart, then he would get deferred. It doesn't make sense, right? And this is due to the nature of the design of the existing devices in the market. And we can all see that it's, it's not the small brands that are out there. It's Abbott, Boston Scientific, Philips. Opsense is probably the only one which is not a very big medical technology company. But all of these wires has the sensor placed at the tip of the wire. So this is in the body. The wires are 180 centimeters long, and they are 0.3 millimeters in diameter. That makes very small sensors, right? And that makes some challenges. One is the construction in itself, that the sensors are so small, and there is a risk of that you get small air bubbles on these sensors, which will sort of impact the measurement. You would get something called drift. Like imagine standing on the scale in the morning, see if you're still fit, and it shows 85 kilos, and 2 seconds later it shows 83 kilos or 87. You don't really know what your weight is. That's drift. But then they have, which is another challenge, that's the hydrostatic pressure. So as you move, most of us have been out there swimming, right? So when you swim on the surface, everything is nice in your ears, but when you dive down 3 meters in the sea, you will feel a high pressure in your ears. The same counts when you do these measurements. As you move upwards, the hydrostatic pressure will go down, but as you move downwards, it will go up, and that will impact the measurement because the sensor is at that specific point. Okay, so that was a long introduction. So we, of course, have one of those wires, but it's totally different technology. So with the same size, that is, as I said, 0.3 millimeters in diameter, but this one is not filled with cables or optical fibers. It's fluid filled. So it's actually a catheter, but it's really, really, really tiny. And that takes away, because even though we are sensing the pressure between the windings up here, the pressure is pushed over to the water column within the wire, and then we measure outside the body. That takes away the sensitivity for the hydrostatic pressure. So independent of your size, or if you're a marathon runner, you would get the same measurement, independent if you're sick on the upper side or lower side of the heart. That's fair. So our product is this, the wire in itself. That's ours. We work with one of the most common pressure sensors in the world, delivered by Medline. So it's a nomic transducer that you can see there. And a standard syringe, which is used to water fill the system. But I mean, that's not the thing. We have really tried to engineer this to ensure that it should be as available as possible for each hospital. So by doing this, we increase the precision quite a lot, and that results in a minimized risk of misplacement of stent. You remember that I said in the beginning that if you have a disease in more than 3 arteries, you will probably get a bypass surgery. We have doctors that actually says that, so we are likely putting people into bypass surgeries because we are misdiagnosing in several arteries. And that's getting your chest cut open to do bypass, even though it might not be needed. And then we have the microcirculation that I mentioned in the beginning. So we have good indication. We have done a pilot study in Gothenburg, but this is not something that we claim at the moment, but we have good indications that giving the precision in our measurement, we can actually measure the microcirculation. That would mean that we could give those 50% a diagnose, the 50% that has the symptoms but don't get a diagnose today. So we currently have distributors signed in 3 countries, Spain, Italy, and Netherlands, Netherlands being the first one. Our application specialist is actually in Spain right now to get the distributor going, doing the training, running cases on hospitals, meeting up KOLs. Italy is planned. Netherlands, we have had some initial sales going, but we also run a 100-patient study in Eindhoven. Eindhoven is one of the 2 most important sites for these type of measurements globally. So that's good. Sweden, we have a study done at Sahlgrenska, 40 patients. That was published as a poster on the conference here in August. The paper will come out later this year. We are approaching the Swedish market on our own and in combination with potential partners. In Germany, we have distribution about to start. We do see studies coming out showing that measurement without impact of the hydrostatic pressure will give a better result. Well, in the French market, when we started to look for distributors, we actually came in contact with 3 of the main big actors in the market. And we have ongoing discussions with a couple of them regarding distribution for quite a few markets. And in Belgium, there is another publication coming out related to hydrostatic pressure. So it is a known problem that have started to be communicated. And we try to do as Torbjörn proposed, to talk to our customers and try to collect the data. And we would say that they perceive it as much easier to guide into the right position, because in 1 out of 10 patients, they have a problem to do invasive measurements because it's hard to direct the device into the right position. But Wirecast is perceived as much easier. And we have better signal quality, of course. We do have a clear competitive advantage. We increase the precision, less stents and all that I've already talked about, and that it's easier to guide into the right position. Less drift, it says there, which is something that we actually didn't focus at, but something that we got on the way due to the size of the sensor. So that's positive as well and very appreciated by the doctors. We have a number of independent publications coming out showing at and indicating the problem of hydrostatic pressures, which is very good for us. In general, I would say that doctors understand and appreciate that we measure with precision. And we have ongoing discussions with 2 major distributors in the global market. Yeah, so we have 1 study published or about to get published. That's the Gothenburg study. That's more related to CE, product safety, and that we actually measure correctly, which is it shows. And we have an ongoing retrospective study, which is about to get published this winter as well, showing that we improve and that we are better on predicting ischemia or ischemia, which is the reason why we're measuring this from the beginning. And we are well on our way with the commercial state as well. As I said, a number of distributors signed, ongoing in evaluation and discussion with other partners. Is there a market? Yes, it is. So I would say that all the procedures that are done that are non-acute, that's our addressable market, right? We could address all those 80% of non-acute cases. But I would say that it's more interesting to maybe look at, okay, so the share of this market that actually are using invasive measurements today, that I would see more as our addressable market, instead of trying to change people's behavior and processes, at least to begin with. And our estimation is that we could get 10% of this market. And okay, so 10%, where did I get that figure? So there is the Opsense, which was one of the actors that I mentioned before. They came out on this market with their own device without any clear differentiation, and they have 5-6% of the market share. We have a clear value that we deliver, so I'm quite sure that we would get more than those 6%. And to be honest, I think this could be the game changer. So why would you, once this get more traction in the market, why would you choose to use a device where you know that you will have an error in your measurement? Or where you will treat patients differently depending on size, if there is a solution to the problem. So the team, so the background to this is that Mats and Johan, the founders of the company, and actually Helene and Hussam as well, these four stands for jointly have 70 years experience from this particular area and this type of devices, because these devices was actually from the beginning invented and developed in Sweden. Radi Medical in Uppsala, which now is Abbott. So we have both the clinical and commercial experience, manufacturing and engineering experience from these type of devices. I have the background from getting things commercial, and we have Lisa, who has a long experience from regulatory, quality and regulatory. So a good team. Board of directors. So here I would mention Urban Martin and Lars Kvarnhem, who also have invested in the company. Bengt Malmfelt, who has a long experience from distribution, having central roles in Vingmed, for example, and Mona, who has actually worked as head of global clinical marketing at St. Jude and Abbott, also long experience from this area. During this year, we have established a medical advisory board, because we think it's important to ensure that we have the KOLs on board. So Morten Kern is probably the guy who has written most of the books related to how to measure invasively in the coronary arteries. And Pim Tonino is running the study in Eindhoven, and Oscar run the study in Gothenburg, which is important as well, because they have experience actually working with the device. So that's Cavis Technologies. Thank you.